Good afternoon. Today we're going to work through IXL assignment QWH, solve one-step inequalities. But before we get to our problems, let's go through a few quick reminders on how it is that we solve these one-step inequalities. First off, let's review what an inequality is. So remember, inequality uses our four inequality symbols. So we could have greater than, and your equation could look something like this. X plus 4 is greater than 1. We have less than, we have greater than or equal to, and lastly, less than or equal to. Those are our four different inequality signs. When it comes to the actual steps of solving an inequality, the steps are pretty similar to when we solve an equation, which you would have done in a prior year. But the main difference between inequalities and equations is the meaning of their answer. So if we were solving an equation, and we got the answer x is equal to 4. That means that variable x is equal to 4 and only 4. That is the only possible number that could make that equation true and be the value for that variable. That unknown variable is now the number 4, and that's the only possible answer. But when we have inequalities, if we were to solve it and we received the answer x is greater than 4, that means any number greater than 4 would work with our inequality. So if we think about the numbers greater than 4, that means 5 is a possible answer, 6 is a possible answer, 100 is a possible answer, 1,000 is a possible answer. So with inequalities, we have a much broader solution set, a much broader set of answers. So this is still technically the official answer that would be written down, because you're not going to be expected to write down every number greater than 4. That's why we have these inequality symbols to help out. But just so you guys understand the difference, it really comes into play with the meaning of your answer. With an equation, there is literally one number that is the answer. With inequalities, you have a huge set of possible answers as long as it meets the requirement. So in this case, if x is greater than 4, the number 0 wouldn't work because 0 is not greater than 4. So 0 wouldn't be a possible answer, nor would any of your negative numbers. All right, now that we just freshened up on that, let's get to the actual solving part so we can talk about how it is we would solve these examples that you see here, how we would find our possible answers for x. The way that we solve inequalities is we first need to identify what our goal is. Our goal in solving any type of inequality is always to find the solution. So solution is another word for answer. We want to find our answer. And the way we can do that is by getting the variable by itself. So if we kind of skip ahead for a moment over to the right here, we can see that this would be our answer. Our variable is by itself. We have x all by itself is less than or equal to 8. That is our goal in every problem, to solve that equation, find out what our variable is, and get it by itself. Now, how do we do that? The way that we solve inequalities is by performing inverse operations. So inverse is another name for opposite. So we want to perform the inverse, the opposite operation. So if we come up here to the top right corner, we can be reminded that addition and subtraction are inverses. They're opposite of each other, as are multiplication and division. Those are inverses. Those are opposite of each other. If we go back to that example at the bottom here, we can see that our original problem said x minus 5 is less than or equal to 3. Well, to get that x by itself, we need to do the opposite of subtracting 5. In the inverse, the opposite of subtracting 5 would be adding 5. So 5 is added to both sides of our inequality, giving us the answer of 8. We'll work through some of these step by step together in a moment, but that's just a quick little example that's worked out for you. And the last thing that we need to cover before we get to our practice is there is one special rule that comes to inequalities. It is the one difference in the steps that you take to solve an equation versus an inequality. And that is when you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to flip your inequality sign. Because if we think about what a negative means, a negative is making that number the opposite already. So 5 and negative 5, those are opposites. So the negative version of 5 is the opposite, which is why if we multiply or divide by a negative number, we have to flip, basically make our inequality sign the opposite as well. If we look at this example down here, we can see that in play. We have negative 3x is less than or equal to 6. Currently, negative 3 is being multiplied by x. So to get the x by itself, we perform the inverse operation. The inverse, the opposite of multiplying, is dividing. So both sides of this equation are divided by negative 3. Since we divided by a negative number, please note that your inequality sign here flipped. It went from less than to greater than. And 6 divided by 3 is negative 2, giving us that final answer of x is greater than or equal to negative 2. All right, let's jump into practice. If this stuff made sense to you, awesome. If you're someone that needs to see the examples, please don't zone out. Stick with me because that's what we're going to do now. I just wanted to give you those few quick reminders and slides. All right, here we are on IXL. We are on assignment QWH, solving one-step inequalities. And just before I get started, as a little reminder, remember that IXL has help for you too. So if you're kind of still scratching your head by the end of this video, check out the IXL video, because sometimes hearing it from a different voice, a different perspective, can make things click for you. With our first question here, we are being asked to solve for y, and our inequality is 4y is less than or equal to 8. So we need to solve this inequality. We need to get y by itself. So first, we need to see what's in the way of y being by itself. Well, it's that pesky little 4. The way that we get rid of that 4 is by inverse operations. So we need to do the opposite. Currently, the 4 and the y are being multiplied together. Remember that this is one of the ways that we can show multiplication. Multiplication can be shown with parentheses, it can be shown with a dot, but oftentimes when there's multiplication between a number, called the coefficient, and a variable, so our letter, they are just put side by side, and that means multiplication. So we have 4 times y is less than or equal to 8. Well, the inverse, the opposite of multiplication, is division. We can get rid of that 4 by dividing both sides by 4. We have to divide both sides by 4 to keep it balanced. Whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Which means we're left with one single y. We just divided by a positive number, so nothing changes with our inequality sign. It comes straight down. And then 8 divided by 4 is 2. That would be our final answer. We have solved for y, and any value of y that is less than or equal to 2 would be a solution, would be an answer to this problem. When you guys type this in, please be careful that you click on the right inequality sign and notice that they're all right here in a row. The y is less than or equal to 2. And on these problems, if you want to use paper, you can. Or you can come down here to the bottom, and IXL allows you to use a pencil and you can write on the screen just like I'm doing if you don't want to grab, a notebook or anything like that to do your work on. Let's try another problem here. Ooh, this is a good one. We want to solve for P. So P divided by 2 is greater than or equal to 4. Our goal is to solve for P. We want to get P by itself. So currently, what's happening with our variable P? Well, it's currently being divided by 2. That's what that fraction represents. Remember, fractions are just another way to write division. So P divided by 2. To get rid of that 2, we always do the inverse, the opposite. What's the opposite of division? Multiplication. We can multiply both sides of our inequality by 2. When we multiply this by 2, that equals 1 and cancels out, leaving us with P. We multiplied by a positive, so I just drop my inequality sign down, and then 4 times 2 is 8. And we're finished. We solved for P. P is greater than or equal to 8. And once again, be very careful to click the right button when you hit submit. Let's try this one. Solve for V. V plus 8 is less than -5. If it helps, I find this helps more later when the problems get more difficult, but it could be a habit you want to start now. You could always draw a line through your inequality sign to kind of help you separate the two sides to see what is on the same side as your variable, what do you need to get rid of. So if that's something that helps you, that's a strategy that you could put into place now. And it's definitely one that I stress when the problems get longer and have more numbers involved in the future. So if we want to get V by itself, we got to get rid of anything that's alongside with it. Well, this plus 8 is on the same side as your variable, meaning we need to get rid of that 8. What is the opposite of adding 8? Subtracting 8. We are going to subtract 8 from both sides of our inequality. So when we do that here, 8 minus 8 is 0. So it goes away and we're just left with V. Bring down your inequality sign. And now we have -5 minus 8. If the positives and negatives are still tricky for you, you may want to write this off to the side horizontally, so in a straight line, to help you figure that out. We have -5 minus 8. Remember, whenever we see both a negative and a subtraction sign, if you're not sure what to do, use keep, change, change. When you have negatives and subtraction signs involved, it'll make things easier if you rewrite it to addition through keep, change, change. So you keep the first number the same, change subtraction to addition, and change your +8 to a -8. Now we have -5 plus -8. So if we remember our rules for adding integers, so adding positives and negatives, when we are adding those, if they both have the same sign, -5 plus -8, you add them and keep the sign the same. So 5 and 8 is 13. And because they were both negative, your answer will be a -13. And that is our final answer. Here's our next problem. We are solving for Q. So Q minus 19 is greater than or equal to 1. So if it helps, you can draw that line straight through your inequality sign to separate your two sides. And then we need to focus on the variable because we're trying to find out what Q is. We're trying to get Q by itself. Currently, we have Q minus 19. So to get rid of that minus 19, we do the opposite. What's the opposite of subtracting a number? Adding a number. So we're going to add 19 to both sides. Negative 19 plus 19 is 0, so that goes away, just like we had hoped, and we're left with just Q all by himself. Bring down your inequality sign. 1 plus 19 is 20, and we are done. We have solved for Q. All right, let's try this one. We'll do a couple more. I want to try to do a variety, so as you guys get into the higher SMART scores, you can still see examples that are similar to what you're going to have. Our problem here is we are solving for C. We have C divided by -1 is greater than or equal to 2. We're focused on our variable C. We want to get it by itself. Currently, C is being divided by a -1. What's the opposite of division? Multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by -1. These cancel out and we're left with C. Now, we just multiplied by a negative number. Do you remember what that special rule was? What do we have to do when we multiply by a negative? We have to flip our inequality sign. So that greater than or equal to flips around and becomes a less than or equal to. And 2 times -1 is -2. And there we have our answer. So don't forget about that rule. If you happen to multiply or divide by a negative number, your inequality sign flips. All right, we'll do one or two more together. Here we have a problem and there's a decimal involved. That's okay. Even if there's decimals involved, our steps aren't going to change. It just may mean you might not be able to do the math in your head. You may have to work out the addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division off to the side. So here we have S being divided by -1 is less than 1 32/100. Ooh, that was an ugly 2. That's a little bit better. All right, our focus is to solve for S. We want to get S by itself. Currently, S is being divided by -1. So what's the inverse? What's the opposite of division? Multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by -1. When we do that inverse, it cancels out, and we're left with S. Do we need to flip our inequality sign? I hope you said yes. We do need to flip our inequality sign because we're multiplying by a negative number. So that less than flips around and becomes a greater than. And in this case, since I'm just multiplying 1 32/100 by a -1, I don't need to work that out because anything times 1 is itself. And if I'm multiplying it by a -1, it's just going to make it a -1 32/100. All right, this is a good one. In this case, notice that your variable is on the right instead of the left. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference. So it looks a little weird because it's not what we're used to seeing, but our steps are the same. So we want to get that t by itself. It's currently t being divided by 10. The inverse of division is multiplication. So 10 times 2 is 20. Do we need to flip our inequality sign? No, we're multiplying by a positive, so that doesn't change anything. And then 10 times 10 cancels out and we're left with t. And personally, I would just type your answer in like that, because otherwise, if you try to flip it around, you might accidentally mess up your inequality sign. So you can submit it just like that and it will be a-okay. All right, let's do this one final question together and then I will close us out for you guys to go and try in your own. We have u minus 4 is less than -1. So we want to try to get u by itself. Currently, we are subtracting 4. That's in the way, that's on the same side as our variable. The opposite of subtracting 4 is adding 4. We're going to add 4 to both sides. -4 plus 4 is 0, so we're just left with u. Bring down that inequality sign, and now we have -1 plus 4. So we have a positive and a negative here. I'm going to write it off to the side horizontally. See if that helps you guys. So we have -1 plus 4. That -1 means we're taking that away from our 4. So when we take away from something, take away is subtraction, right? It's probably how your second grade teacher taught it to you. They said, we're going to learn how to take away. Take away 1. So 4. And if you're taking away a -1, that brings us down to 3. And I don't think I was showing all my fingers in the camera. Oh well. So -1 plus 4 is 3, meaning our answer is u is less than 3. All right, it is your turn to try it, guys. I believe that you can do it. Remember, if you do want to see a few more examples, you can check out IXL's help video. You'll hear it from a different voice, and maybe that'll help. And of course, you can always reach out to your teachers or come to a help session. Bye.